This is the 25th installment of my Prometheus analysis, where I delve into Ridley Scott's 2012 science fiction film. I am the Film Symbologist. In this episode, I will discuss one of the key stories being told in Prometheus. Back in episode 19, I described the domes on LV-223 as stages, where the events of the film are played out and observed by members of the crew and the audience. If the pyramidal structures are stage-like, then what dramas, plays, and narratives are being acted out and told on them? By the end of this video, you should have a good understanding of one of the stories that is being told, and you should gain some insight into how this fits into the larger narrative of Scott's movie. As previously discussed, in ancient Greece, the theater of Dionysus was the birthplace of tragedies, which were plays that focused on the downfalls of high-status members of society, usually as a result of a character flaw. Later, the comedy genre of plays was developed. Comedies told stories that were more lighthearted, with happy endings. Another genre of plays that eventually became popular were satyr plays, which combined elements of both tragedies and comedies. Music also played an important role in all genres of Greek plays. In Prometheus, music is observed or played throughout the film by multiple characters. The domes on LV-223 have likely been host to many stories over their long history. One story that mostly precedes the events of Prometheus can likely be characterized as a tragedy. The high-status engineers were annihilated as a result of their own rebellious and treacherous actions. In the events of the film, this tragic story seems to be repeated through Peter Whalen's quest for eternal life and his subsequent and perhaps inevitable death. But there are also more lighthearted moments in the film, including Fifield getting lost, Milburn's groan-inducing decision to follow the horror film trope of sticking his hand where it clearly doesn't belong, and Yannick's questioning of Vickers' humanity as a ploy to get laid. And of course, there's the film's seemingly happy ending with Shaw departing to paradise. All these elements appear to point to the comedy genre. I'm interested in one comedy in particular that seems to be acted out on the stage of LV-223. Clues as to which story it is are littered throughout the film. One prominent example is offered in the scan of the domed theater structure itself. When a portion of the ship's crew initially explores the pyramid, Fifield unleashes scanners that begin mapping the interior of the structure. This information is transmitted to the ship, where a holographic model is being projected. We see the progress of this mapping throughout the film. While Milburn and Fifield are hunkering down in the big headroom, we see the pups mapping what appears to be a void in the structure of the dome that winds up to the top. It's not until near the end of the film, when Shaw is urging Yannick to stop the juggernaut, that we see the completed model. It shows a hollow loop that spirals around the inner dome 9 times, plus an additional space above that is differentiated. Why 9 plus 1? Why not 6 or 17? Is this just some random configuration that one of the CGI modelers or graphic designers working on the film chose? I don't think so. I think this is a clue about the story that is being acted out in and around the dome structures. This is a reference to the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise from Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. Written in the early 14th century, Dante's Divine Comedy is widely regarded as the greatest example of Italian literature, and as one of the foundational works of Western culture. Dante's epic poem tells the story of his own imaginative journey through the afterlife. In part, the poem serves as an allegory for the soul's journey to God. The poem begins on the night before Good Friday in the year 1300 AD. The reader is introduced to a fictional version of the author Dante as he is lost in a dark wood, representing being lost in sin. He is attacked by beasts, which include a she-wolf, that he cannot evade. He is unable to find the straight path to salvation, which is symbolized by the sun behind a mountain on the horizon. Aware that he is ruining himself and falling into a low place where the sun is not present, Dante is rescued by Virgil, a guide who represents human reason. Together, the two of them begin their journey to the underworld. Similar to how the film's audience follows David and the members of the Prometheus crew as they venture into the dome with the sun setting on LV-223. Throughout his epic poem, Dante draws from classical and medieval mythology, philosophy, and theology. In Greek mythology, the Olympian god Hermes would bring the dead to Charon to be brought to the underworld. In order to get to hell, or Inferno in Dante's Divine Comedy, Virgil brings Dante to Charon to be ferried across the Acheron River to the underworld. And so in Scott's Prometheus, David transports the crew in a Weyland Corporation spacecraft past LV-426 in order to arrive at LV-223. Fans of the alien universe may be aware of an alternate name for LV-426 that relates to this aspect of Prometheus's plot. As for LV-223, in previous episodes I've compared the moon world to Tartarus, the area of the underworld where the rebellious titans from Greek mythology are imprisoned. In Dante's poem, hell consists of 9 levels or circles, each of which represents an increasingly severe sin and corresponding punishment. In this way, each sin's punishment in Inferno is a contrapasso, a symbolic instance of poetic justice. For example, in the 20th canto or verse, fortune tellers and soothsayers must walk with their heads on backwards, unable to see what is ahead, because that was what they tried to do in life. In Prometheus, a similar phenomenon occurs with the black goo. For instance, Fifield flees from the engineer corpse and avoids the hammerpeed out of fear. When he gets infected with the black goo, he seems to gain a fearlessness and aggression that he didn't previously possess. For Holloway and Shaw, who are apparently unable to conceive offspring, the goo seems to increase virility and overcome infertility. It may also be the case that for Holloway, the goo transforms his arrogance into humility. In each case, it seems the cure is worse than the ailment. The film also depicts characters committing sins and other characters receiving punishments reminiscent of Dante's Inferno. In the poem, the first of hell's 9 levels is inhabited by non-believers, whose fitting punishment is to exist in a state of limbo. Will the skeptics among the crew of the Prometheus expedition face a similar fate? Is this the fate the LV-223 engineers have already faced? The second circle of hell is home to souls who were ruled by uncontrollable lust during their lives, as represented by Yannick and Vickers' lust for one another. And the punishment is to be constantly swept up in a storm that cannot be controlled, which Shaw experiences. In the third level, Dante encounters people like Holloway who succumb to gluttony, or excess consumption of food and drink. Those punished in this circle are frozen in place and pelted by dirty rain, similar to the cold temperatures and stiffening and partial submersion of Milburn's body in goo that he experiences in the ampule room. The fourth level of the underworld consists of 2 groups who committed the sin of greed. One hoarded wealth, like Weyland with his ruthless company and his personal pursuit of eternal life, while the other group spent frivolously, which is perhaps why Fifield is so desperate for money that he's willing to take any job that pays. For their punishment, both types of offenders are pitted against one another in a futile exercise.
I ain't here to be your friend. I'm here to make money.
Like those in the 5th circle of Inferno, who are condemned to fight with one another for eternity as punishment for their rage, Vickers seems angry and forever at odds with David. Fifield, who along with Milburn doubts Shaw's claims of man's divine creation, is burned with a flamethrower, which is similar to the occupants of the 6th level of hell, who are guilty of heresy and are trapped in tombs of fire. In the 7th circle, Dante notices a horrible smell.
Tina, turn it off now!
Oh God, the smell! Oh God, look at that, It's getting worse.
Dante also comes across a version of Geryon, a creature from Greek mythology. In the poem, the creature is depicted as a chimera, a monster of fraud, that has the innocent face of a human, but a scaly body, not unlike the armored corpse of the engineer the crew encounters in the doorway to the room with the large humanoid head sculpture. In this level, those guilty of violence are punished with death in a desert, with fire falling all around them. This is reminiscent of Vickers' death under the Juggernaut. The 8th circle is associated with fraud, like David's theft of the urn and sowing of discord between Shaw and her god in Holloway, and Shaw's retrieval of the decapitated head. This level of Dante's Inferno is quite elaborate, with a variety of punishments, including being chased by snakes like Milburn and Fifield, burned with flames like Holloway, and being torn apart by a demon like David. The 8th circle is where Dante encounters falsifiers and counterfeiters, including alchemists, who are punished with leprosy. Dante also comes across Nimrod, who is the builder of the Tower of Babel in Genesis, and whose punishment is an inability to communicate, which is the circumstance in which the humans and engineers also find themselves. After this, Dante sees the giants from Greek mythology, standing as sentinels or guardians and forming a threshold between the 8th and 9th levels of the underworld. The 9th level is reserved for those who have been treacherous against God. As their punishment, the offenders are submerged in ice for amounts of time commensurate with the severity of their sin. In Prometheus, the crew members are frozen in cryosleep chambers, with Wayland submerged the longest, perhaps indicative of his treachery, most explicitly against Shaw, whose partner Holloway is infected with Wayland's authorization, and who is lied to, deceived, and essentially offered up as a sacrifice for Wayland's quest for immortality. As one might expect, Satan occupies the very bottom of hell. In Dante's poem, the being formerly known as Lucifer is depicted with 3 faces, one black, one palish yellow, and one red. This corresponds with the 3 sections and types of sin in Inferno: ignorance, spiritual blindness, and betrayal, cowardice, fraud, and treachery, and anger, violence, and wrath. Satan's faces may also represent the negrito, albedo, citronidas, and rubido stages of the alchemical magnum opus process. In hell, Dante sees serpents trapping people, which is reminiscent of the fate of the last engineer. At one point in the poem, Dante wonders if he will ever escape Inferno, a thought that also crosses Shaw's mind.
Neither one of us is leaving this place.
But Dante, like Shaw, does eventually make it out of the underworld. Both characters' journeys seem to help them recognize and reject sin, which allows them to begin their ascension up the 9 levels or terraces of Mount Purgatory towards the Garden of Eden. In this second part of his Divine Comedy, Dante ventures up the mount and undergoes a purification process. The 2 lower levels consist of those who have been excommunicated and are late repenters, both of whom are waiting to continue their journeys until they are ready. The following 7 terraces correspond to the 7 deadly sins of pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust. Along the way, Dante's soul is purified and prepared for entering the Garden of Eden at the Mount's pinnacle. In Scott's film, Shaw embodies the penitent believer that is also the lone human survivor.
God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The third and final part of Dante's Divine Comedy deals with the soul's journey to the eternal heavenly paradise, which consists of 9 celestial bodies, spheres, or realms that culminate at the ultimate divine dwelling place. The spheres correspond with the traditional Ptolemaic cosmology, and they represent the perfection of various virtues. The 9 realms are the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the starry heaven, and the crystalline heaven. In order, the virtues associated with these spheres are faith, hope, charity, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, love, and the unity of these values. In Dante's poem, the final destination is a 10th differentiated realm referred to as Empyrean. At the end of Scott's film, Shaw has metaphorically ascended Mount Purgatory, where she is presented with a choice. The scientist can return to her earthly paradise and pursue the heavenly paradise in her home solar system. Or she can treat LV-223 as the Garden of Eden and as an appropriate launching pad for a direct trip to Empyrean. Must salvation be sought in our solar system? Or has Shaw already been saved on the moon of LV-223 through her faith, her hope in her guide David, who represents the Roman god Mercury, her charity towards others, her wisdom in the light of the Zeta Reticuli suns, her courage to meet the last engineer, her desire for justice for the people of Earth, from the Jupiter or Zeus and Dionysus or Bacchus-like beings she encounters in the dome, her moderation and self-restraint at the foot of Calpamos, the ringed Saturn-like planet that LV-223 orbits, and her love of Holloway. Has Shaw unified these virtues within herself? Is she ready to travel to Empyrean? She seems to think so, because rather than seek spiritual answers closer to home, Shaw decides to continue her adventure into the unknown. Will she find what she seeks? Or is she doomed to repeat her experience from the Prometheus expedition? Dante's Divine Comedy represents one's journey towards the ultimate divinity, beginning with the recognition and rejection of sin in Inferno, followed by the penitent life of the believer in Purgatory, and completed by the soul's arrival in Paradise. Inferno is eternal hell, similar to the war that precedes the Prometheus expedition on LV-223. In the Divine Comedy, heaven is an eternal paradise, like the future hope that characters like Shaw grasp after. Purgatory, on the other hand, is a temporary realm, like the events of Scott's film, which act as a microcosm of a cosmic battle, only waged on a smaller scale by the characters. In his poem, Dante references Greek, Roman, and Islamic history, philosophy, and mythology, medieval scholasticism, European folklore, and biblical tradition. Likewise, with Prometheus, Ridley Scott references prehistorical, classical, ancient Near East, medieval, Western, Eastern, and modern philosophy, which includes Dante's Divine Comedy. Previous episodes in this series have explored Prometheus's other references. Scott offers comments on these works of literature, film, drama, and art through the story being told in his 2012 film. The work of Dante, like the others discussed, is dense yet expansive, so the interpretation offered in this video is just one of many possible analyses that could explore the relationship between Prometheus and great works of art like Dante's Divine Comedy. Who would have guessed that such a seemingly minor CGI model of a holographic map held a key to connecting the film to one of Western culture's most important pieces of literature? With this video and its analysis of Dante's descent into Inferno, ascension up Mount Purgatory, and transcendence to paradise, you should have a better handle on part of the story being told in Prometheus, which draws inspiration from the tragedy, comedy, and satyr genres. In the next episode, I plan on picking back up with the discussion from episode 24 about the larger narrative being told in Prometheus by exploring the so-called source myth. If you enjoy content like this, like the video and subscribe to the channel. For early access to new content, consider becoming a member of my YouTube channel or Patreon. Links about how to join are in the video description. This is the Film Symbologist. Thanks for watching.